Another type of resource that we're always going to be dealing with in today's environments is the printer. As much as we've become, an electronic society, and there is a lot of things that don't get, there are a lot of things that don't get printed out. There's still plenty that do, and the printer has not decreased in its importance. It's always important that people be able to print hard copies of documents. Sometimes, it's absolutely necessary depending on the scenario. So we have to understand how to connect printers to Windows 10, how to work with them, and some of the various options. And there are a lot of different components that are involved in the printing process. You have the printer, which in Microsoft's language is the actual logical printer. So that's what we view in devices and printers. It's what shows up there, or in the devices area of the settings app, the connected devices. That is, when we use that term, we're talking about the logical printer. When Microsoft uses the term print device, they're referring to the physical machine that spits out the paper. Of course, there are different types of print devices, but from our perspective, and there are problems that can happen with the print device, but from our perspective, we're really just setting up the logical printers. There is a print server, potentially. Sometimes the printer itself is a print server, or the print device itself is a print server. Other times you might have a Windows server that's sharing printers. Technically, any machine that is sharing a printer is acting as a print server. And so that means that multiple computers can be connected to the printer on the print server and can submit print jobs through it. You have the printer driver, which is the device-specific device driver. It's meant to convert the print jobs into a language that the physical device can understand. That's done in a page description language, PDL. So we have three major categories there: PostScript and PCL, somewhat older, and then the XML paper specification is a newer type of driver model that was introduced with Windows Vista. And so that's the XPS-based printer drivers. You have the printer port, the means by which you are going to actually send a print job to the print device, and that can be a local port like LPT, or USB, the latter being far more common these days, but it could also be a network interface port. A standard wired NIC or a wireless communication. And then you have a spooler service, technically functioning on both the client and the server. When you submit a print job, it is spooled to a special spool directory, and then it is printed from there. And so it's the spooler service that handles that whole process. Now, printers are installed in a few different ways as well. We technically have a local printer or a network printer. Once again, just an explanation on the terminology is going to be important. From the perspective of Microsoft, a local printer is a printer that is set up, remember that's the logical, that's set up on a machine. Okay? So I set up a printer on this computer and I'm not going through a print server. That's a local printer. And you might say, okay, well, that's obvious. But then we list the three different kinds of local printers. Well, one is USB, one is LPT, and the other is TCP/IP. And so as soon as you say the TCP/IP, wait a minute, isn't that a network printer? Well, no. Again, stepping back and saying, okay, this is from the perspective of where is the logical printer? If the logical printer I'm setting up is actually connected to a shared printer on a print server, then that's a network printer. If the printer that I'm setting up is local to this machine, even if I am connected to the print device via a TCP/IP port and submitting jobs over the network directly to the device, because I'm printing directly to the device, it's considered a local printer. Network printers then can be manually installed by connecting to a print server and double-clicking a printer, or by walking through the Add a Printer wizard and just specifying that it's a network printer. They can also be published through group policy. So printers that are directly attached to an individual client machine, those can be shared with other hosts. Direct attached just is another way of saying local. When I share a printer, there are going to be some print permissions that are granted. And that's this is a resource, so that determines who's authorized. Now, by default, the Everyone group gets the print permission. So every time you share a printer, it's by default available to anybody. But you could modify that. We could make it available only to a certain departmental group or something like that. You can also extend the permissions if you give the Manage Documents permission. That's the ability to manage the print queue. By default, the creator-owner special group has that permission, so any job I submit to the printer, I will be able to manage in the queue, but I wouldn't be able to manage other documents. So if you gave somebody the Manage Documents permission, it would allow them to manage all items in the queue, prioritize them, pause, cancel, those things. And then Manage Printers is simply the full control permission of a printer. There are a few different ways to manage printers that we have in Windows 10. The traditional way was the Devices and Printers utility that started up in Windows 7. We also have the connected devices in the Settings app, but that really just kind of takes you, I mean, there's some that we can do there, and it also has a link to Devices and Printers. You can use the See What's Printing option to manage the document queue. You have access to an Add Printer Wizard. And then in Devices and Printers, you also have something known as Device Stage. Each printer driver will have some additional metadata that comes with it that gives you some information about that particular printer. And so it's specific things like links to maybe order new ink, or links to diagnostics, or to check the levels of ink, etc. And then you have the MMC Snap-in that we had seen earlier, the Print Management Snap-in. That allows you to manage multiple printers and print servers, manage queues, manage drivers, and that is also the mechanism by which we can deploy printers via group policy. So let's take a look now at managing printers. We're going to start in the Settings app. When you go into Settings and then Devices, we're going to see here printers that I have. Now, mind you that these are printers that are either on the network or something like that, or they're printers that I've already configured. And I can add a printer or scanner here as well. Okay, now when I go add a printer, it's going to search for printers and scanners. It shows me this. I'm not going to be able to add that just because that's actually there because I'm linked to my Microsoft account. That's my home printer. So I say the printer I want wasn't listed, and it just launches the Add a Printer Wizard. We can, at that point, select a shared printer by name. We can add a printer using a host name or IP address. We can add a wireless printer. We can add a local or network printer with manual settings. Let's do that. We'll say we want to use an existing port. I'm going to say, that this essentially is the name of my printer. Let's see, MP. We'll go next. Do you want to share this printer? I will, and we'll just change the name a little bit. We can put a location if you want. You can set that as a default printer. Okay, and then now that shows up. I can double click this, or I can access that, I should say. There's not really anything that you can do. So it's fairly limited what we can do here. These are other printers that are local on this network, but we have a link down to Devices and Printers. So when we go to Devices and Printers, now we've got access to the printers. And personally, I prefer to just come here in the first place. Here's my Canon MP495 that I just added. This is the device stage area. Notice it's now down here. It's showing a visible window, and that is actually what that printer looks like. Okay? This will be populated depending on the printer itself and depending on what they've added, but displaying the print queue, printer properties, and at this point just support. So, but some of them might have the ability to order. So here's a slightly different printer. Okay, and here I can operate the scanner on this. I can display the queue, the printer properties. I can view the status of the printer. Okay, so it actually shows me this is online. These are the levels of ink. And then we've got one over here. This is even a different one. So you notice how the picture now is more photorealistic. The options that we've got in each of these are going to be different. It's going to be based on the driver. This is a really cool addition and just helps out, I think, quite a bit. So you also have the option to add a printer here. It's going to launch that same wizard where it's searching for, or very similar, it's searching for printers. Will then allow me to say the printer I want's not listed, and there we go, we're back to the exact same settings. Okay. Going to the properties of a printer, you can go just to properties, and you're not getting much. This is just kind of the informational. So what you do is you right click and you go to printer properties. That'll actually show you all of the options, the sharing options for the printer, the port that you want to use. There's an option here to enable printer pooling, which allows you to actually connect multiple print devices to a single logical printer. So it's to give you more, the ability to print more at one time. I mean, the devices are going to have to be the exact same. They're going to need to be in the same location. They're hooked through the same driver. But basically, when you check that box, it just allows you to check multiple boxes for ports. Okay, so that can be used in high volume printing situations. On the Advanced tab, we can configure times that this is available. Printer priorities. Printer priorities allows me to set up multiple logical printers pointed at a single physical device. Then through the use of priority and permission, I can determine whose print jobs get priority. It's different purpose than printer pooling, but it's set up the exact opposite. Here's my spooling settings. Okay, so by default, it's going to start printing immediately, which allows me to free up the application. On the security tab, this is where we have the print permission. So you notice everyone group has the print permission. And then device settings, that's going to vary based on the device. So I go to this color LaserJet and go to printer properties. First of all, I've got some different properties, and then I go to device settings, and you got different stuff because there's multiple trays, there's different fonts, there's duplexing, maybe collating on some systems. So there's going to be some similarities, but there are going to be things that are different based on the actual printer itself. Okay, printers are something that are going to be shared through the home group. By default, if you're in a home group, if you're in a business environment, then you're probably going to set up the printer and then just manually share it. So they are very important. It's important to understand the various components that go along with the printing process in order to be able to set them up successfully and make sure that people can always print when they need to.